So we're good
Success.
to go. Good evening. Today is Thursday, March 20th. It is 6:31 p.m. We're a minute late. This is a special meeting of the Arlington School Committee because we're all very special. Tonight's meeting of the Arlington School Committee is being conducted in person and through the use of Zoom. This meeting is being simultaneously broadcast on ACMi, and the meeting is being recorded. Because we have a member participating remotely, and that's Dr. Allison Ampe, all votes are required to be taken by roll call. Persons wishing to access the meeting using Zoom may find information on how to do so on the town's website. The posted agenda and supporting materials for this meeting are also available on the town's website. Due to open meeting law restrictions, the committee cannot participate in or access Zoom's chat function. When everyone is welcome to observe the meeting, active remote participation requires advance notice. All participants are asked to activate their camera and shall provide their full name in the interest of developing a record for the meeting. We now move to the discussion and vote to approve the superintendent's fiscal 26 proposed budget, which with a vote of adoption will become ours. Mr. Thielman moves the adoption of the fiscal 26 budget.
Second.
Second by Ms. Morgan. Any discussion? Seeing none.
I think it's just to say for the public, we've discussed this. Everyone just tunes in for 1 second. We've discussed this at length in multiple venues.
Absolutely. We've discussed and discussed and discussed. Dr. Allison Ampe.
All right. I've noticed when I'm going through it again, the updated version, I'm noticing a few things which I think are more of the coding shifts and making Munis sync up with what we're doing. And they don't substantively change anything, but I was just I'll try and capture those and send them to the superintendent and Mr. Gorski just to update as we go forward.
Okay, so the motion by Mr. Thielman, seconded by Ms. Morgan, with any minor typographical adjustments suggested by the chair of our beloved budget subcommittee. We have discussed this extensively, and we had a public hearing last Thursday, which gave everybody an opportunity to come and talk about it. Seeing no further discussion from the committee, roll call vote. Ms. Exton?
Yes.
Mr. Carden?
Yes.
Dr. Allison Ampe?
Yes.
Mr. Thielman?
Yes.
Ms. Gittleson?
Yes.
Ms. Morgan?
Yes.
Chair votes in the affirmative, 7-0. We have a budget for the fiscal 26 school year. Next item is finance report number 3. Mr. Gorski.
Oh, hold on. I need to be promoted.
Hard to promote a superintendent.
Am
You're
I-
already at the top of the heap.
Am I pulling open your memo?
Yes.
My favorite thought.
And you're already the best district in the state. Ain't no way to promote you.
Give me 1 second.
Didn't think we'd go that fast on the budget.
I'm doing. I didn't really, actually.
We are such an efficient group.
Well, and I wasn't in Zoom yet, so.
Yeah. Oh, that evil Zoom.
Okay.
And by the way, while we're waiting, I want to welcome C. Ferrante, who is representing AEA tonight. She is also in Zoom land.
All right.
Here we go.
Okay. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Superintendent Homan. So this is the second quarterly budget report that I'm providing the school committee. It's as of February 28th, 2025, 2/3 of the year through the fiscal year. There are 3 reports, as in the prior report to school committee in December, which were through November 30th, covering the general fund, the town appropriation, grants, and revolving accounts. We want to focus really on the town appropriation side. As with previous reports and how it was structured when Michael Mason was in this role, the There's a general fund report that is run based upon the year-to-date expenditure report out of Munis. There's an original budget line column that is what the school committee voted for the budget in FY25. There's a transfer column which identifies any transfers that have been made, a revised budget, an expended column, and an encumbrance column. You can see from the graph here on the first page that we are expended or encumbered about just over 63% of our budget. We're 2/3 of the year, so we're on track with spending what we would expect through this time of the fiscal year. For the projected expenditures, obviously we're looking at where we are in the budget, where we are in the fiscal year, and then projecting out where we will be on June 30th. So for salaries, that comprises of looking at our weekly, our bi-weekly, our 21 payment teachers, our 26 payment teachers who are paid through July and August. And obviously they have different pay cycles, looking at where we are currently with salaries and then projecting that out through the end of the fiscal year. We're also looking at our non-salary expenditures and projecting those out through the end of the year. The business office is in process of completing transfers. We actually sent them over to the comptroller's office today, and then we'll discuss this further when we're looking at the bottom line. There's a couple of major transfers that we have, which are moving expenditures from the general fund budget to circuit breaker and to the emergency shelter assistance reimbursement grant. The projected bottom line for the object department and budget category reports reflect those transfers. They're not in the bottom line of Munis currently. And then another factor are vacant positions, less so than when I gave this report in November, because we currently have 20 vacant positions from various departments, including SPED and facilities. But the majority of these vacancies are either being covered by substitutes or contracted services. So if they were true vacancies and they weren't filled, we would be deriving a cost savings from them, but they're being covered financially in another manner. And some, in talking with our HR director today, we have some that are in the process of being filled within the next week or so. So we go into our object summary report. Again, this is comprising both salaries and non-salaries. You're going to notice that we have a mix of both projected surplus. The remaining column are what we're expecting as of this date, or as of February 28th, to close the fiscal year at in these particular object codes. Now, this will change over time. It's a projection. It's a snapshot in time. And with more data, that will become, and as we go through the fiscal year, will become clearer. And I'll talk a little bit about that, plans on closing out the fiscal year as we go through this. We have, as I mentioned, some, and part of the reason why we have kind of this surplus and deficit, again, looking at, as we've discussed throughout the fiscal year, ways some of the budget was loaded in Munis. We're doing some of that cleanup work. It also came up when we were developing the FY26 budget, and we've put a lot of work into that, and we will continue to do that cleanup in Munis so that we have much cleaner budget going forward into FY26. A couple items that I want to highlight, and certainly we can circle back if school committee has questions about specific object codes. One, and I'll give you the object
Please.
code. That's easier. It's about halfway down the first page when we're looking at 510303, our other school food service salaries. You'll notice that there is no budget there, but we have dollars that are expended, and we're projecting dollars out, and we're projecting a negative bottom line in that object code. Now, this is a line that was budgeted in the past. The budget number was removed for the FY25 budget, and we've added dollars back into FY26. Superintendent, I don't know if you want to talk about this related to the breakfast program. Those are salaries that are that typically charge the general fund that are.
Right. So we started, there was, in the revolving partially as a result of some of what happened during the pandemic with subsidization from the government, federal and state, of student lunches and breakfasts, they had the room to accommodate the incorporation of the breakfast program on the food services budget. And that was not, we knew that was not going to be long-term sustainable as an adjustment, which is why we bargained with Unit D to adjust time and built it into the salary calculations that we received from the override so that we could put it back into the general fund. We also pay our lunch monitors, and for a year or two, we're paying our lunch monitors off of the revolving account for food services. So we need to put those dollars back in the budget, and I suppose didn't in FY25. And so it had been charging, this happened last year too, where we charged it to the general fund and then moved the expenses off onto food services. So we could look at whether it's possible to move some of this expense to food services this year, because they have had some vacancies and so they've had some salary savings. It's possible that some of that could go over, and we've put it back in FY26. And I think that's all of why you're seeing that.
Typically, what's happened in looking at past fiscal years is any excess in that account has been transferred to school lunch. That didn't happen in the FY24 close. So, if we go forward to the next page, I want to highlight two object codes on this page for school committee. One, near the top of the page, 510326, we have our SPED summer school program. Again, there actually isn't a summer school program at Hardy. There's multiple sites. We will change this in Munis as part of our cleanup. So there are dollars being charged here without a budget. We will address that going forward. Coming down to 520404, there's contracted transportation. As you can see, we're showing a negative remaining balance. Now, part of what's going through here are SPED transportation, homeless transportation, which is typically under budgeted because there's McKinney-Vento, there's dollars that are coming back that will go to the town. There's also ESSA funding, grant funding for foster transportation, which is at a lower level. So again, just highlighting this, and there will be, as part of the transfer that we do related to circuit breaker and the emergency shelter funds, this balance, this negative balance will be reduced. Another at the bottom, I just want to highlight for school committee 520507, which is the custodial supply cleaning line. So in talking with the facility staff, I actually met with Chief Jefferson and Lauren Healy about an RFQ for a designer for the Gibbs classroom project the other day. And we were talking about this particular line, which probably, will need to be split out into two lines, because what is being put into this line is not just supply cleaning or cleaning supplies for our custodial staff. It's also the contractual services for the night crew who are cleaning the high school. So that's part of the reason why that is over. And there's also a lot of these expenses have been covered in the past by building rentals. So any deficit number has been transferred off of the general fund. If we come down to almost to the bottom of the report, I want to highlight the tuition number, the 520645. So these are our out-of-district tuitions. You see the negative balance there. Again, this is a line that encompasses our private placement tuitions and our collaboratives. It's under budgeted because we have circuit breaker, which we know that we're going to charge a portion to it. And then we come down to the grand total. And I did debate how to display this to the school committee, knowing that displaying a negative number is not always probably what you're used to. But to be transparent about it, this actually is not a negative number. We have these other sources of funding where we are going to transfer, as I mentioned, expenditures off of the general fund to circuit breaker, to the emergency shelter assistance reimbursement, Again, that's almost $2 million with the projected surplus as of 2/28/25 of just over 171,000. Again, that number will change over time. There's another factor here which is pretty difficult to project, but we're going to be, as we close out the fiscal year, we're going to have purchase orders that are paid. We're going to have invoices that are paid, and then purchase orders that are closed out. And if there's a balance on those purchase orders, it's going to go back to the bottom line. That's not atypical for some of our smaller purchases. It's not atypical for tuition and other items in SPED. When I was in Somerville, it was like clockwork that we would have $400,000 that would go back to the bottom line. I don't want to add that in here yet because I want to go through the cycle, but we did have a similar number for the FY24 close here in Arlington, where there was about $400,000 in closeouts for tuition and transportation. So I say all that with the caveat, I'm confident that we are on budget, that we will likely have a surplus, and that we will, from our standpoint, look at developing a plan depending on the size of that surplus of how to spend it down, including prepaying some SPED tuition for FY26.
I'll just add that it's very possible as we move through this that we find that there are encumbered funds that were encumbered early in the year that haven't been released as we posted to budgets. So as the encumbrances get released, that frees up funds. Right now, the encumbrance is factoring into the remaining as if it's been as if it acts like an expense. And I do think, just looking at some of these encumbrances, that some of them probably aren't entirely accurate. The pay ones are, because that's your projection of pay, the 51 accounts, but the 52 accounts, it's highly likely that there's some encumbrances there that may not get charged to, or that have been charged already on the expense, but are not need to be released on an encumbrance. So they'll be going on tour with principals to make sure that they understand what can get released, and then we'll be closing out POs and requisitions soon. I did also want to note, though, that I think what has happened in the past is that the projection column would be used to sort of balance things out. If we knew, for example, that there was a planned transfer, even if the transfer hadn't happened yet, that would get factored into that projection column to make that bottom line a little neater so that it didn't feel alarming. And so I think what this does is it gives you a true picture of what we've expended, what's encumbered, and what we anticipate might also be spent on top of the encumbrances under that projected line. But there are a couple of places, for example, where you have a projected that it's all encumbered or expended, and then there's additional dollars in projected, and it's creating a negative number. And in reality, if a department head was going over their budget on a line, we would start asking questions, especially if that was putting them over their bottom line. And we do. So we're not concerned about it because we know that in the past, what you've seen has accounted for anticipated transfers. This just doesn't do that preemptively. So we're telling you that that's what's going to happen sort of at the bottom.
And just before we move on, since you mentioned the tour, I just wanted to kind of take you through before we look at the other two charts here. So what's going to happen as we prepare for closing out the fiscal year, I will be sending out a memo as early, I was hoping to do it today, as early as tomorrow, to principals and department heads with spending deadlines. So as we begin to prepare for year end, we're going to have finance staff actually go out to school sites, kind of a little bit of a different way of doing things, and a good opportunity for our AP person, our procurement person, and our finance director to actually go out to school sites, meet with admin, meet with principals, review their purchase orders, see what can be closed out, and try to do that earlier so that we don't have kind of this scramble late into June. So the hope is to have a lot of that done by mid to late May.
Would it be appropriate to do questions on pages 1 through 6 and then move forward?
Or I leave it open to.
Would anyone in the committee like to ask questions pertaining to the first 6 pages? Mr. Carden.
Thank you. So in the past, we encumbered salaries, and I know we're not doing this year for whatever reason, but can you explain, like, for 51,102, that 26,463, 280 projected number, how do you calculate that?
Top of page
So
three.
the teacher salaries, yeah, so we're actually looking at, we're going into individual salaries and projecting out the number of remaining salaries. So we have 21 payment teachers, and then we have our 26 payment teachers who are obviously paid in July and August that we need to accrue for, so that they charge back to June 30th. It is based upon 9 remaining payrolls, 8 or 9, sorry, I think it's 8 for our 21 payment teachers and 13 for our 26 payment teachers, projecting out what we've expended so far and looking at what's remaining based upon the pay periods.
Is that like in a spreadsheet, or physically, how does it, okay.
We have a full spreadsheet with multiple tabs with the year-to-date for the non-payroll, and then we pull the payroll in as well.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions on pages 1 through 6? Seeing none, press on. Thank you.
Okay.
Can I just answer as to why we haven't encumbered salaries this year?
Go right ahead.
So that was because the individual who did this, and it is a constant process because you have to release, with every payroll, you have to release that encumbrance from that payroll. We have had leave the vacancy, and now we have a vacancy that we posted earlier today. And there was not anyone else in the payroll office who knew how to put the encumbrances into the system. And so that's why we haven't done it this year, but we made sure we had a projection model in place so that we knew how much we were going to be spending on salaries and didn't end up in a precarious situation with it.
Okay, press on. Page 7.
I have a question.
Oh, Kirsty, yeah, I can't see you here. All I'm looking at is a spreadsheet.
Okay. So first, I wanted to thank Mr. Gorski because he actually hit 4 of my 5 questions, or 4 of 6 or something. Anyway, so the remaining ones, item 510308, which is other full-time salaries. I think it's on page 1. I was just wondering what's in that.
I can give you it might be easier if I send school committee a full breakdown. You want?
I just meant what, it doesn't need to be a full breakdown. I just don't understand what might fall into that.
What sort of positions those are?
Yep.
Yeah,
Okay, I will, as we're discussing,
Okay.
I will pull it up, so I want to be accurate in the positions that I'm giving you.
okay. Then I'll ask my other question about this. So this is looking at page 6, which is a summary page of everything. And I just wanted to clarify, when you're talking about circuit breaker reimbursement, you really mean taking money from the circuit breaker reserve we have that's from what we received last year. It's not the circuit breaker reimbursement stuff we're receiving this year, correct?
That's correct. Those are the 1,775,000 are the
Yeah.
receipts that we received last year that were
Yeah.
used as part of the budget. The receipts that we're receiving this year are that allows us, because we're holding them for the additional year, allows us to factor into the FY26 budget.
Okay. I think we might want to put the word reserve or something in there somewhere. Because otherwise it looks like we're just using what's coming in, and we know not to do that now. So, okay, that's all I had.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm trying to pull up I wanted to put my hands on the, what's encompassed in the 26, in the 5103. Bear with me 1 second here.
While you're doing that, I want to say that bottom line of the bottom of page 6, I think it's very transparent, very obvious what's going on. So You said you were a little nervous about showing a negative number. I very much appreciate the way it was calculated. Our Zoom went poof.
They're still there. They're still on,
Okay.
well, they're still on my computer. I don't know. They're
Okay.
on our screen.
Dr. Allison Ampe, can you still hear us? Dr. Allison Ampe, can I hear you? We're back.
We're back.
We're back.
Let's vote a few things before we
Let's
get.
make sure they
Okay.
can hear us and stuff first, though.
Okay, yeah, we
Hold
gotta
on,
do the
they've
usual.
got us.
Kersey?
They've got us muted.
Okay.
Thank you.
Kersey,
You're back.
we are back. Steve,
Yes,
Steve.
I am here.
you're here. Okay, Margaret,
I am here.
it's all wonderful. Good, we're back in business. We're on page 7 someplace, I believe. We're going over the current financial situation of our beloved schools.
Found the positions? You want to?
Yeah, I can
salaries
speak
are.
to, sure. So to answer Kirsty's question about the 510308 account, those are primarily operational positions, including IT, data, bus drivers, and the like.
Okay, we're up to page 7.
Okay. Are you going to bring it, or should I bring it up, or should I just continue?
Hold on, I can pull it up.
Thank you.
Kirsty, say words if you have a question, because I don't know if we'll be able to see you.
We can't see the raised hand function.
Okay, go ahead. Nope, yeah. I have started screen sharing, but nobody can see my screen. I do not know how to fix that. Can anybody in
Liz
Zoom
Holman
see my
has
screen?
started screen share.
Yes, we can see your screen.
No, they can see it, just you all can't. If you have the document open in front of you, then at least the people on Zoom can see it, and I'll make sure that I'm in the right place. There we
Oh,
go.
there we go. Poof.
Perfect, okay. So continuing on with the budget update, this is again general fund information. As opposed to the object code, it's broken down at the department level. Again, we have a mix of primarily at the schools where, and in the superintendent's office, that's explainable by the additional dollar, the collective bargaining reserve, which was placed in the superintendent's budget. But under curriculum instruction, we have departments who are in surplus, and then the flip of that, we have departments which are in deficit, which include elementary system-wide, early childhood, the Bishop, which we will look at, school in deficit, and then a large deficit under SPED and student services. Part of that obviously related to the expenditures which are going to be transferred off of the general fund to circuit breaker into the emergency shelter reimbursement grant, but also because positions charging at the department level as opposed to the schools. So we have a surplus out at schools where positions are located, and these are some of the items that we've begun to clear up for the FY26 budget. And we also have the transportation total that we had discussed earlier, also in deficit, again, related to homeless, related to special education. And finance is in deficit, but that's also related to a couple of software items that were charged to finance to business services. Bottom line, again, the projection, including the circuit breaker reimbursement and the emergency shelter funds, projecting a surplus. We come down to the next page. This is the budget category page. This is where we're showing the anticipated transfers. So there are the columns for the budget, the transfers that have happened throughout the fiscal year, the revised budget, the expended, the encumbrance, the projection. the remaining balances where we have the budget contingency line that was added for collective bargaining this year. There are projected surpluses and projected deficits in elementary and special education, with the anticipated transfers related to circuit breaker and the emergency shelter funds. And then we have an adjusted remaining, you can see there, which shows what the budget categories, based upon the projections, based upon expenditures and encumbrances through the end of February, what we'd be looking at with a projected surplus of 171,000. We would obviously have the contingency that would be covering some of the deficits on the other line, and potential transfers that we would need to do to ensure that all the budget categories are within the budget or in surplus.
Questions to this point?
Sorry.
Mr. Carden?
So, but the anticipated transfers won't get us to balance. So must be other anticipated transfers get us to balance in these categories?
Because we need to not be negative.
Right. So those anticipated transfers, which actually have been sent over to the comptroller's office today, related to circuit breaker.
Oh, so those are transfers off of the core appropriation, but the transfers within the appropriation, you haven't.
No, we haven't done it
Yeah.
yet. No,
Okay.
we haven't done that yet, but we will, again, as we move through the fiscal year and begin planning out, closing out purchase orders and the like, we'll have a better sense of what these categories look like. But I do anticipate that we're going to need to do a transfer between the budget categories.
Yeah, of course. I mean, because the budget contingency won't, because it was meant to be a contingency. But yeah, my request again is to try to do the majority of the transfer in May or June, early June at the latest, and not wait till everything has already been spent and then come to us in September.
Anyone else? Percy, are you cool?
I'm good.
Good. Press on.
Okay. We shift off of our general fund budget to our revolving accounts. There are several that are included in the report. I know the chair question, I left the athletic fee revolving account on here, and I left it on for a reason that I want to talk about, and that's the first one that's here. Gate receipts are being deposited there. That's something we could look at, whether that's the appropriate account for that, but the revenues are there, so I wanted to display it, but this is not related to us charging fees to students to participate in athletic programs. We have the preschool. We have actual revenues just over the budgeted amount. We budgeted just over $263,000. We're expecting a higher amount for FY26. The teacher salaries are charging there. That's that $126,000 number under 5101. And then we're projecting out that would be fully expended through the balance of the year. We have the building rental fees budgeted around $500,000. We've received to date $162,000, expecting additional revenues. I don't know if we're going to quite reach that $500,000 level. And there tends to be a lot of transfer activity, the expenditures that are going through the building rental fees. Obviously, when I started in August, that was a period of closing out the fiscal year. There were a number of transfers that the superintendent had worked on with Mr. Mason, which I finalized when we closed out the fiscal year, that moved expenditures from the general fund to building rental fees and also to our foreign exchange tuition account. So there'll be more activity as we go through the final quarter of the fiscal year, particularly with that account. We have, moving on, we have the Pierce Field rental fees budgeted at $20,000. We've taken in just under 11, expecting additional fees as we go into the spring season. We have tuition and payments. These are students who are would be attending particularly SPED programs that would come into the district for and would be paying tuition. This is at a much lower level than it has been in the past. We have our foreign exchange tuition revolving account. The timing of this, I just want to speak to the timing of the revenue for this one in particular. So we have budgeted revenue for FY25 of $400,000. As you can see in the actual line, the second column, we've taken in just under $89,000. The way this revenue works is that students who are attending, foreign students who are attending Arlington Public Schools pay tuition in the spring to attend for the following school year. So we are actually going to be receiving dollars May and June for students who are coming in September. There's an annual meeting with Judy Duffy, who supervises the program for the high school. Meets with the superintendent, with the principal. I imagine that I would be involved in that conversation as well, looking at tuition for the following year. There's a small amount, you see the budgeted amounts here for salaries, supplies, materials, and contracted services. There's a small amount of salary that is actually charged to the foreign exchange tuition account, and there are other transfers that will hit this account as well. We have the Bishop Bus revolving account, budgeted at $100,000. We've received just over $78,000, expecting to be close to that amount, that revenue amount for the year. And then we have our AEA and other revolving account. It was budgeted at just over $20,000. We received a check from the union for just over $21,000, and you can see the actual salary there, the $13,850 that have hit that revolving account.
Any questions on the revolving accounts? Mr. Gardner?
Thank you. So for the building rental and the foreign tuition, those projected expenses, are those really transfers, or are those things that we sort of have in reserve, you know, loading up paper supplies for next year or something like that?
So we're basing them off of the budget, but there are transfers that we expect to happen at year end that will hit that account, particularly based upon the year-end close that we went through for FY24. There have been some items that have charged here, which I didn't pull into the account. I will update this so school committee can see, but typically we had some items that, and I'll give you an example. As part of the scanning project, when central office moved over into this building, instead of carrying forward a large number of files, there was a scanning of documents for payroll, for finance, for special education. There were a number of invoices that were, for whatever reason, that weren't encumbered in FY24 that came forward early in FY25. They were charged to the foreign exchange account. But there will also be some transfers at year end that I expect that will come close to the budget number. I don't believe that we'll be quite at that $600,000 line now.
Okay, because trying to understand the difference from the way your predecessor did it and the way you're doing it, my understanding was the reason why we weren't showing a deficit last year at this time was because those transfers hadn't occurred, but they were taken into account in that first table, right?
Yes.
So then we had to, in order to make that first table accurate, we
Right.
actually had to do all those transfers. This year, though, that first table is accurate, and these transfers may or may not be needed. They may be available for other spending.
Yes, that's correct. I do think it'd be worth us taking a look at this, these expenditure lines, whether those are actual posted to building rent, like what has been posted to building rentals, because some stuff does get posted straight there.
Yeah.
Other things we retroactively would post there. And that usually happens every year because we go through and say, okay, well, this got posted to the general fund, but really it belongs on rentals tied to a rental, this custodial overtime, for example. And that's to keep, revolving accounts appropriately balanced with a balance that makes sense as well. So usually that was all done at the end of the year. And it was done having been projected on that first table. But there are probably expenses to some extent already charged to, like for Monatomy, we know those salaries are already charging to that revolving account. And figure out to what extent any of this is projection. I don't know if you know that.
I don't have the number offhand. Part of it is the way that's pulling into, so some of the revolving accounts are set up a little differently. The preschool one charging directly, some of the expenses that are coming in, are hitting the building revolving, building rental revolving, and the foreign exchange tuition are pulling in a little bit separately. So
One of the things that I gained a stronger understanding of at the end of last year was that our building rental charge process, because so many different things are kind of tied to the expense associated with the building rental, until we have a formula that is dependable, that accounts for the different things associated with the building rental, it's hard to charge directly to the building rental. And we haven't ever done that. We haven't ever said, these are the things associated with building rental, all of these things will automatically get charged to that revolving account. That would allow us to keep the revolving account and the general fund budget fairly even over time if we posted more frequently, and it would reduce the number of transfers, paperwork we had to do at the end of the year. So that'd be a goal. We've been a little buried in some other stuff lately, but we do want to get to a point where that's sort of charging throughout the year and not all at the end.
Yeah, and the other way to do it, at least for now, is, up at that first table where you have the circuit breaker reimbursement and the emergency shelter reimbursement. If you're planning to move spending, move some other category of spending onto building rental or onto foreign exchange, that you add those lines to that, and that gives us a better picture of where the surplus or deficit might be. Thank you.
Anyone else? Kirsty, are you okay?
I'm good.
Okay. And last, we move down to the grants.
So the final item on the budget update is our grants. This includes our federal grants, our entitlement grants, our state grants, and our private grants. The way the federal grants are set up, there's a longer than 1 year period to spend, so that's why you're seeing both FY24 and FY25, even though some of the 24 ones are basically spent down. Our largest grant is our 240 grant IDEA. It's $1.8 million in FY24, just a little bit under that for FY25, and we're expecting a like amount for FY26 allotment, barring any changes at the federal level. We have our entitlement grants at Title I, Title II, Title III, and Title IV. After IDA, our largest grant at state level is for Medco. And we have $591,000 set aside for FY25. We're going to receive a slight decrease for FY26, down to $585,000. And then we have a mix of our grants that we received from AEF, from the Arlington Ed Foundation, private grants, various amount of small grants. And the emergency assistance shelter's on there, but we need to update that to include the amount that was brought over from free cash as well. So that's displaying 80,000, but it's actually 195,000.
Questions on grants? Any other questions overall?
I have a
Allison,
question.
Dr. Allison Ampe, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. Actually, it's more of a comment. Mr. Gorski, just in terms of that table with the grants, it probably would be good in the future to separate it out between what we've received and what we're expecting, because given the things that are happening in the federal government, that's information that we're gonna want to be kind of tracking.
I mean, what we've actually pulled down.
We're acknowledging your comment, Dr.
Okay,
Hussain.
thank you.
I guess I'm trying to understand, are you saying what? So,
Right now it says awarded and expected revenue amount, but it doesn't say anything about what we've actually received in hand.
and that's, correct me if I've got this wrong, but because we don't receive it in a, like, lump allocation, we pull it down as we post expenses. And that's one of the things that's potentially concerning, is that what's happening in cases where grant funds are being cut off is that you just can't pull down funds. You might have posted expenses, but you can't pull the funds down. So we don't receive it, really. It's listed as,
It's
it's
like we have a
awarded,
credit-
and then it's
we have a
expected
credit
to
line
be
for
able to
that.
pull it down, but we don't actually get it all at once, for example.
Are we getting it directly from the feds, or do we get it through the state?
Through the state, and they're fed through state. Yeah.
Okay, I hadn't understood that part of how it worked. Let me think about if there's any, I guess you'll just have to tell us if it turns out that we've had expenses that we've tried to charge to the account and have not been accepted. So, okay, thank you.
Thank you.
But you'll have to tell us to get shut off. We're having a little trouble hearing you, Kirsty,
Yeah.
so if you can get close to your mic, that'd be helpful.
Okay. Anything else under this agenda item? Seeing none, we're moving on to job descriptions. We have two job descriptions before us. One is for a confidential executive assistant to the superintendent's office and the school committee, and the other is for the central office executive manager, superintendent.
Okay, so these are two new, we've talked a little bit in budget conversations about a reorganization of some of our central office roles to support some additional Unit C in the finance office and the HR office, and to make sure that the roles that are in the superintendent's office are serving myself and Dr. Ford Walker's needs exceptionally well. So these two roles would replace the two administrative assistant roles that are currently in our office, and actually the three. So it's a consolidation, because that allows us to put some positions in some other places. They're both at a higher salary level as well. The manager role is getting some oversight responsibilities for oversight, organization, and planning of some of the events that are hosted by the central office and superintendent's office, of central office operations, oversight of workflows, convening teams when necessary across departments to revise an approach to something, to make sure that when we're sending information through often digital systems or on paper, that it's getting to the appropriate places in a timely manner so that we're supporting the schools as quickly as we can. And this role will also be responsible for making sure that our Unit C members, both at central office and at the schools, have the professional development that they need throughout the year, any additional information that they need or training that they need on technical systems, as well as an opportunity to connect with one another and share information. The administrative assistant role is going to be a shared administrative assistant role with myself, the deputy superintendent, and all of you. The responsibilities associated with governance and managing governance committees is wrapped into the role. Our hope is actually that the new and improved Novus software will also enable us to do some easier uploading of materials than the current platform does, and give subcommittee chairs a little more control over their subcommittee meetings. But this role does have that wrapped in the support of the school committee, and that is why it's also at a higher salary. There is also the provision for both roles that should a new governance committee emerge, that they would serve that governance committee as well as assigned, and it would kind of depend which one we would give that to depending on the nature of the project. So for example, if we have an OMS building committee before long, hopefully we will, then one of these two roles would take that on and be the point person for that project, for that committee. So I'm happy to answer any questions about these. They haven't been significantly revised since we talked about them in CIAA, except to incorporate some of the feedback from those meetings and categorize the job responsibilities into a few sort of core buckets of tasks that would be expected of these two roles.
Note the superintendent worked with the school committee, at least specifically myself, and I think Ms. Morgan, in terms of making sure that the allocations of school committee responsibilities to the one position were correct. Any comments or questions? Seeing none, do I?
I have
Go ahead,
questions.
Dr. Allison Ampe.
Sorry. Okay, my question, so one thing I don't remember which one it fell in. I felt there was a place where it needed to say school committee, subcommittees for posting minutes and agendas and stuff. I can look for that, but my bigger question is about or 2 points about the central office executive manager. First, it doesn't mention that that there is a chunk of the duty is being kind of a backup to the other position in terms of being the person in the office or answering phones or anything like that, like if they're out or something. And my understanding had been that their role was in part to do that when I had talked to the superintendent before. So that's one question. And then the second one is for the same position, the manager one. Reading some of the duties, I'm getting confused about what the interrelation between this position and Mr. Coleman's position and the communication department in terms of writing and data analysis and things like that. So those were my questions. That one isn't really that second one isn't really for the job description. It's more, I'm just confused by this position and how it relates to the others.
Sure. So I do want to note, okay, I'll start with part one. The backup for one another is an expectation in the current office. It's not necessarily built into the current job descriptions, but it is an expectation of the office that we cover for one another. We manage our vacation time such that we have coverage in the office. So I can make that a little more explicit. I thought I had something along those lines in here, but I'm not seeing it right away. So I'll add that. I do see how you can sort of pull some overlap with other offices into the central office manager role, some of the stated expectations of that. I do want to be explicit that those are specific to the superintendent's office. So if we're asking, for example, for data support, we do have times when the administrative assistant or the deputy superintendent, for example, is overseeing a data reporting that's going to the state, because it's not that the data team is not doing that, they are, but because it requires input of information that's, for example, about student discipline or about something that's going on at the school level that requires us to go back and forth with the principals to understand what could be a student level situation. And so we have involvement in our office with that. And so that's the function this person would be serving. It wouldn't be the data entry and submission to the state, which is a lot of what our data team does. It would be more of when we have reports that are going back and forth with the schools, this person would be the point person, which takes some of that responsibility of going back and forth on individual data entry situations off of, for example, the deputy superintendent. It's also for communications, about communications that are coming directly from me, something otherwise I would write, and there are still things that I am pretty tight about writing myself, for example, snow day announcement, that I would entrust this person to draft for me first. And right now, that function is not part of the role. So I'm hoping that it will be with this, but it's not intended to. A lot of what happens in communications and data is to serve the schools and to serve other departments. This would be specific to stuff that's coming directly out of the superintendent's office, going directly to you, drafting a presentation, for example, that I've provided in the past, and those functions, not a direct overlap with those other departments, though I can see how that wouldn't be clear.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, any other questions? Okay,
Can I
Ms.
just-
Exton.
So just supporting Dr. Homan and responding to Kirsty's question. So number 6, the second sentence says,
Which job description?
the office, the,
The managerial
Yes.
role, yeah.
when the executive assistant is absent, coordinates the superintendent's and deputy superintendent's meetings, conferences, and travel arrangements. So I don't know if adding something there to,
I could actually just make that more general and say, fills in.
yeah. So I mean, to me, that it
That
was
might be
already
easier.
there,
Yeah.
so I just,
Any other questions or comments? First, we'll take a motion to approve the job description of Central Office Executive Manager. Motion by Mr. Thielman, second by Mr. Carden. Roll call vote. Ms. Exton?
yes,
Mr. Carden?
Yes.
Dr. Allison Ampe?
Yes.
Mr. Thielman?
Yes.
Ms. Gittleson?
Yes.
Ms. Morgan?
Yes.
Chair votes in the affirmative. That's a 7-0 affirmative vote. Looking for a motion now to approve the job description of confidential executive assistant to the superintendent's office and school committee. Motion by Mr. Thielman, second by Mr. Carden. Roll call vote. Ms. Exton?
yes,
Mr. Carden?
Yes.
Dr. Allison Ampe?
Yes.
Mr. Thielman?
Yes.
Ms. Gittleson?
Yes.
Ms. Morgan?
Yes.
Mr. Schlickman, chair votes in the affirmative. We have now completed the agenda. Motion to adjourn by Mr. Thielman, second by Mr. Carden. Roll call vote. Ms. Exton?
yes.
Mr. Carden?
Yes.
Dr. Allison Ampe?
Yes.
Mr. Thielman?
Yes.
Ms. Gittleson?
Yes.
Ms. Morgan?
Yes.
Chair votes in the affirmative. 7-0 vote. We are adjourned. Thank you very much. Aren't we special?
Great job.
Good night, folks.